Welcome back to another edition of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm Satoli. Today we're in Rush County, Indiana with Shirley Beal at the Fairview Cemetery. Hi Shirley, how you doing today?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing great. So what can you tell us about the cemetery?
The cemetery was actually started in 1824 with a donation of the first acre by Robert Groves. And over the years, there have been additions to that, and now the acreage is actually approximately 5 acres. And we have a township trustee, and he and his family actually maintain the 5 acres for the cemetery. The entryway, I have just recently found out, we were here a couple days ago and actually saw some dates on there, and I didn't know what those dates were for. And Marilyn Gray Roberts had sent me some information earlier, and I found that those were actually set in 1934, which was the 100th anniversary of the cemetery. And I also found that they had an anniversary celebration of the cemetery for the 100th year in November of 1934. And there were approximately 300 people who attended that, and that was held at the Fairview Christian Church. The stone that we have behind us was actually donated by a family of a gentleman by the name of Walter S. Saxon. He and his wife had been part of the community, and when he passed away, he wasn't buried here as he had planned, because he has lots of ancestors that are buried here, and he wanted to be a part of this cemetery. But his heirs in 1962, along with the trustees of the cemetery and the Women's Association, dedicated this beautiful monument to Robert Groves, who donated the first acre for the Fairview burial grounds, and all of those who have maintained and helped upkeep it over the years. And I wanted to feature a few of the soldiers that are buried here. We actually have 3 that were part of the American Revolutionary War, and Robert Groves was one of those. Robert Groves was actually only 12 years old when he enlisted for the Revolutionary War. And he signed.
He was 12?
He was 12. He was born in 1764, and in 1776, he enlisted in February as a drummer.
Okay.
He enlisted for a year, and he actually was born in Delaware. And he was actually in Kingsbridge, Westchester County, New York, with Colonel George Washington at the time.
Okay.
And I believe on this marker, it actually states that he was a bodyguard for George Washington.
Really?
So that I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
That to me makes him a little bit famous.
Absolutely.
The second Revolutionary American soldier that we have buried here is Samuel Iles. And then the third is George Tibbets. Now, George did not serve a very long term and was denied a pension, I found out. But he also served in the War of 1812. And then we have another gentleman in the cemetery whose name was Zachariah Parrish, who also served in the War of 1812. But in the Civil War, we know that there was an H.T. Haley, there was also a William S. McCrory, and then there was also W.W. Thrasher.
So Shirley, can you tell me more about these veterans that are buried here?
I have one more veteran that I wanted to share with you, and he is probably one of the more recent veterans that was buried. He actually served during World War II, and he was a trainer for pilots. He was actually a pilot, and he was in the United States Air Force for 12 years.
Okay.
And during the 1800s, this was fertile hunting grounds for the Indians. And one of the most famous Indians that I've read about while researching Fairview was Chief Mahoning. And Mahoning is a name that's very familiar to a lot of us because there's a church camp by the name of Mahoning Valley.
Okay.
But the white folks actually called this gentleman Chief Ben Davis. And there is a Ben Davis Creek that's not too far from here. It's to the south and to the west of us. And that's where he camped.
Okay.
And I've read various accounts on his last days. But one story that I found most interesting was the fact that he actually liked to drink liquor. And when he did, it loosened his tongue. And one of the sad things was that he actually was down in Brookville one evening at a tavern, and he was talking about his taking the life of a lone settler, as well as his entire family, except for one young man who got away. Now, Chief Ben Davis actually tracked this youngster, and he failed. Now, 2 days after this time when he was actually in this tavern in Brookville, his body was found with a hole in it, his head.
The Indian.
The Indian, Chief Ben Davis, was no longer around. And the theory is that the lone survivor of that gruesome night was there listening to the story. But there was no legal jurisdiction or investigation completed at all. Now, Fairview is actually located kind of between two counties, and the largest residential area is in Fayette County, and it is believed that it was laid out on land that was owned by W.W. Thrasher, one of our Civil War veterans.
Okay. So, Shirley, can you tell me about the Fairview Christian Church?
Yes, I can. In 1842, there was land that was actually donated by William Shawhan, and he precisely made it understood that this land was to be used for the building of a church property. And the church itself was actually organized in January of 1843. And then, of course, the church has been there in this area all that time. So it's one of the longest continuous Christian churches in the area.
I'm sure.
In 1870, they decided that they were going to build a brick building, which is actually what the church is now. And that was actually completed in 1872. And it was built by Alfred and Stamper White. And they used bricks that were actually made from the land that actually stands across from the church. And that actually belonged to Quincy Parish. Now, the other thing that we wanted to share with you is the fact that there was a Fairview Academy.
I've heard about that. Tell me about it.
In 1848, there were a number of men that decided that they needed a higher learning availability in the area. So they decided that they could secure the land, which was actually land that was from William Shawhan, and it was going to be located directly behind the church. So they went and talked to their neighbors. They were able to secure enough money, and then they hired Josiah Smith to build the academy. And they actually held classes in Dr. Ephraim Clifford's office prior to opening the doors of the building being built.
Okay.
Now, they were very blessed because it was about the same time that Alan R. Benton came to Fairview to visit. Now, Alan had just graduated from Bethany University, I believe, in West Virginia. And they hired him, and he served in the capacity until 1954 as the principal of the Fairview Academy.
Huh.
Now, the Fairview Academy was in existence for 35 years. And there was another gentleman who is of national fame, and his name is Daniel R. Van Buskirk. Now, he was a known national orator. He had been a minister here while he was serving at the academy for the Fairview Christian Church, and then later he served in churches in Indianapolis, also in New York, and also in Illinois.
Okay.
He later got into politics a little bit, served as a state legislator and a state senator. But he was a very well-respected man, and he was very well known as a very good citizen and a very good Christian.
And is the academy still standing?
No, it only stood, the building is still there.
Okay, but it is no longer used.
No longer used as an academy. It was only used for 35 years as an academy.
Okay.
And it is now used as a residence.
Okay.
And I wanted to share with you a story about one of their students who made a major difference in the lives of a number of people. And his name is Abraham Shortridge. And Abraham Shortridge was raised on a farm in Henry County, which is just north of us. And he was born in 1833. And at the age of 18, he had only had approximately 18 months of education. And he decided he wanted more. And of course, had heard about the Fairview Academy. So he sold his horse for $62. And with that $62, he was able to buy a 5-year term, or not, excuse me, a 5-year, but a 5-month term at the Fairview Academy.
Okay.
So he was down here for that time. And then afterward, he went on to teach for $10 a month in Dublin, which is located on US 40. He later went to Richmond and Centerville and obtained additional education. Now, Alan Benton, who had been the original principal here for the Fairview Academy, later on became the president of what we now know as Butler University. And at that time, it was the Northwestern Christian University. So in 1861, Alan called Mr. Shortridge to come be a professor at Northwestern Christian University. And he was there until 1863, when he was asked and took one of the most challenging jobs I think he could have had at that time. And that was superintendent of the Indianapolis Public Schools.
So can you tell me a little bit about the Fairview School? I've heard about that.
Yes. When we had the first acre that was actually donated where we're sitting, there was two purposes to that building that was made at that time. And the first was to be the Methodist Church. And then the second was a school. That was in 1824. There was another school that was built that was approximately a half-mile stated from the Moffat's Crossing, and unfortunately I'm not sure where Moffat's Crossing was. But then again in 1827 there was another school that was built, and I believe that it was actually in the area of what we all know from recent years as being the Fairview School. Now that was in 1827, and then later on in 1904 they built a bigger school, and that housed grades 1 through 12. Now there's a, what do I say, can't think what you want to call it, but it actually shows you, it's by the roadside.
A plaque?
A plaque.
Okay.
And it's in memory of that school. So on that plaque, it talks about they had the first rural parent-teacher association that was formed in the state, and that was in 1912.
Okay.
Now in 1914, it states that there was an addition to the school to make it larger, and come consolidation, the last class that actually graduated from there was in 1958. And there was consolidation of the Fairview School, the Orange School, the Harrisburg School, and it all became what's known as Fayette Central.
Okay. So can you tell me any other interesting stories about the cemetery and the area?
One of the things that I found quite interesting was the fact that at one time they had erected toll gates on the county line road between Rush and Fayette County. And one of those toll gates was actually at the Fairview Crossroads. And in order to get to church, they had to go, the folks here had to go through the toll gate to get to church. And it didn't last long.
Yeah.
They actually burned it down.
Did they?
They did. They opposed it so strongly that they decided that this isn't going to stay. And for a community that is so giving, it's kind of hard to believe. I would like to thank those who have helped me. Some of those I don't know their names. But I started out in Falmouth, and I met with Steve Gwinnett and Linda at the Falmouth store, because a lot of people go there, and they told me exactly who I needed to talk to. So I then went down and talked to John and Amanda Dolan, and then I was able to talk to Patrick Dolan, and they have a sister, and I'm not sure exactly what her name is, so I want to make sure to thank all of them. And then Betty Jo Wilson, whose husband was a minister at the Fairview Christian Church for a time frame. Also Larry Stevens, who's a former graduate of the Fairview School. Jim Noah, whose mother lives just west here of the cemetery. We talked to him Monday evening. to try to see if he could make any memories for us. And then also Jim McElfresh, I believe he had actually gone to school there as well. And I know his sister did. And I know there were other people that were looking for a book at the church for me. So all of them I want to thank for helping me with the project on the Fairview Cemetery and the Fairview community, for all their kindness. And without them, this just wouldn't be possible.
Thanks for watching another edition of History in Your Own Backyard. Today we were in Fairview, Indiana with Shirley at the Fairview Cemetery. Thanks for all your help. You did a great job.
Appreciate it.
And remember, travel slowly and stop often. See you next time. Bye.